along and make it seem like you can't survive without them, right? Like me. And in some cases that's true. But basically, if it gets so complicated you can't understand what they're talking about when it comes to nutrition, just forget it. Just stick with this whole food plant-based diet, meaning eating foods as close to their natural state, as grown, plants as grown. So what can I eat on a whole food plant-based diet? Tons of greens. Greens are loaded with antioxidants, and we think that's why they work. We have all kinds of theories about that. Antioxidants take care of free radicals, and we think that reduces inflammation, and we think inflammation is bad. But we also know that cultures that eat lots of greens do really, really well. And that's the important thing. Lots and lots of colorful vegetables, whole grains, nuts and seeds, lots of herbs and spices. What should I avoid in a whole food plant-based diet? Animal products. I haven't had animal products in 25 years, except by accident. And so that includes meat, fish, dairy, and eggs. Also avoid sugar, white flour, oils, and processed food. So people say, well, what about olive oil? Isn't that good for me? Well, there's no such thing as a healthy oil. There are some oils that aren't as bad for you as other oils. Olive oil and canola oil are two of those oils that aren't as bad for you as other oils. But you don't need them in your diet. And it's really confusing because I know people who say, oh, yeah, I drink a quarter of a cup of olive oil every morning because it's good for me, right? I mean, that's the kind of news that's out there, right? So if you follow my advice, I do not expect to make money. In fact, I'm losing money right now. You'll probably live a longer, healthier, happier life without using medication, without spending money on health care. And if everybody followed my advice, there would be less human suffering. I've got to stop looking at that clock. Our nation would be stronger and less likely to be bankrupted by health care costs. I'll use my phone. Okay. Our planet would be healthier, and fewer animals would suffer. So who am I? I went to Yale. I graduated in 1976. I graduated from Tufts Medical School in 1980. I got my boards in 1984 in diagnostic radiology, and then the first year they came out with the vascular and interventional radiology boards was 1995. I took them, passed, then I took them again at the 10-year, and those have to be renewed every 10 years. And there's an exclamation point after this because I just took it a month ago. 2 days ago I found out that I passed. So thank you. I've also worked in 9 states and 2 countries and dozens of hospitals because I can't hold a job. Although I had been in Rochester for almost 30 years, so I was the chief of diagnostic imaging and the most important thing though is that I really
Thank you. Sorry, guys. Okay.
That must be the place that's listening, right? Apparently we're being streamed. So what was that? What was that? We raised 3 vegan children. That's actually why I can explain how this works. I mean, nobody has, really taught this in school. Certainly people say, well, gee, it's a shame that doctors don't get taught nutrition in medical school. If I had been taught nutrition in medical school, I would have been anyway, so what could that have done? So what about these 3 vegan children? Did they survive? So this is what I advocate to everyone. Eat a whole food plant-based diet with minimal or no added oils, tons of greens, get lots of exercise, outside if possible. Be skeptical of any supplements. Be skeptical of yourself. Consider what are your motivations. Are you just selling a supplement to make your office viable, or do you gain financially from what you advocate? And always ask, are we doing more good than harm? That's primum non nocere, right? That's the medical. Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah. So, our goal should be to empower patients so much that they don't need us anymore. For those of you in the other room, somebody just tripped over the stairs, and we all got upset. But we're okay now, right? You're okay? How many professions can you name that should be trying to put themselves out of business? Really, that's what we should be doing, right? We should be making people independent, not dependent. So this is what I tell other doctors. What you are about to learn should not leave this room. Use this information to save your own life and the lives of your friends and family. Do not share this with patients. It will be very bad for business. How many of you have seen this map? You ever seen this map before? Okay, so this is this is from the CDC, and this is a map that demonstrates obesity trends. And when I press a button, it's going to become a video, and it's going to move forward in time, and that number there is going to go up from 85 to 2010. And the dark blue states have a 10 to 14% obesity rate. The light blue states less than 10%, and the states that are white, they don't have data. But as we move forward in time, the data will become available. So let's see what happens when I push the button. So you can see this obesity epidemic is just progressing very rapidly. We have to add new categories every few years. Pretty soon it's going to be 20 to greater than 20%. Then it's going to be greater than 25% for some of those states. And eventually we hit greater than 30%. And this stops in 2010 because the CDC had the nerve to change the colors and messed up the video. And I don't have time to fix it. Someday I'll fix it. I would actually prefer that they would fix it. But anyway, that's the problem. Now, what about life expectancy in the U.S.? Well, we're 27th. How much do we spend on medicine? Well, that's the red line. We spend almost twice as much on healthcare as any other country, and we come in 27th in life expectancy. So we're not getting a lot of value for our dollar. Now, this is a video I would like to, let me see if I plug this in, what happens. Can we shut off this? Oh, let's see here. Let's just skip this, right? Okay, all right, we're just going to skip this video. I'm sorry, this is me testifying at the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee meeting in Washington at the National Institute of Health in 2014, January. So that's me telling people how we performed an experiment on our children. We became vegan 25 years ago, and that I had the good fortune that the experiment was a success, and I had the good fortune of sending a fortune in tuition checks to America's finest educational institutions. So anyway, they got a good laugh, then we moved on. So let's see what they can now. And I came down really hard on dairy because the whole problem with the dairy industry is that they've convinced Americans that we will fall apart, our bones will fall apart if we don't have any dairy. But you can look around the world. If you look at dairy patterns, there are places where people don't have osteoporosis and they don't use any dairy, like the Okinawans. And in fact, if you look at the countries in the world that have the highest osteoporosis rates, they have the highest dairy intake. So is the solution for them to consume more dairy? Probably not. So this is they finally issued their executive summary in February of this year, so about a year after I testified. Not that what I said had anything to do with this, but anyway. There are two fundamental realities. First, about half of all American adults, 117 million individuals, have one or more preventable chronic diseases, and about 2/3 of the U.S. adults, or 155 million, are overweight or obese. These conditions have been highly prevalent for more than 2 decades. And poor dietary patterns, overconsumption of calories, and physical inactivity directly contribute to these disorders. Secondly, this is all influenced by personal, social, organizational, and environmental contexts and systems. So in other words, it's the whole culture that we live in. Some would say we live in a toxic environment. So positive changes in individual diet and physical activity behaviors and in the environmental context and systems that affect them could substantially improve health outcomes. So here they are recommending that we need intensive behavioral education. This is from an article in Circulation, which is a journal of the American Heart Association in 2008. And the conclusion from this article was, the goal of eliminating 90% of coronary heart disease is feasible with control of the major established risk factors beginning in youth. The cultural and societal changes necessary to achieve this goal won't be easy and they won't happen soon, but it's time to start. Notice that number, 90%. Who would have thought that 90% of heart disease is preventable? You have this huge system in place to treat people once they get sick with heart disease, but they don't have to get it. In fact, it's probably higher than 90% when you're talking about coronary heart disease. So the argument is always, but nobody will do this, right? We know what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to eat a whole food plant-based diet. We're supposed to exercise. We're supposed to meditate and do yoga. So we have stress reduction. So, but what if there were a way to empower people to do this? And here's the ad. Okay, and they were happy about it. So this is why Rochester Lifestyle Medicine was created. Now, honestly, when I started preparing this talk, this wasn't going to be part of it. But since we got going, I thought I might as well tell you about it. So the goals of Rochester Lifestyle Medicine are to reduce the burden of chronic disease, reduce healthcare costs, reach as many people in the 9 counties of the Finger Lakes area as possible, and create a lifestyle intervention practice model that is sustainable and reproducible elsewhere. And the reason I have that line in there, because really there's nobody in the country who's doing this. Nobody is actually coming out of their residency, their family practice residency, and going into lifestyle intervention on this kind of scale. You can't. There's just no model for it. So that's why I'll explain what the CHIP program is in a minute. But CHIP is very scalable because it's based on video that can be presented by facilitators. And we just trained 30 facilitators for the Rochester area. And our final goal is to put ourselves out of business, right? Because once people are independent and they know about this stuff, they're not going to need us anymore. And what's interesting, really, is it's probably going to. Did you know that obesity is contagious? If you know somebody who's fat, you're more likely to get fat yourself. Well, if you know somebody who's healthy, maybe that will change you, right? And we could just turn the contagion the other direction. So it's very possible that if you get just a critical number, maybe 5 or 10% of the population to start doing this, then the rest of the population will follow. That's kind of our thought here. So our methods is we're going to try to move people towards a whole food plant-based diet, get people to increase their physical activity, teach stress reduction, reduce social isolation. CHIP has a social aspect that it takes 9 to 12 weeks for people to complete the CHIP program. It's 18 sessions. And once they're done, they become part of Club CHIP, which meets every month. It's a social thing. We also created something new called CHAMP, which is the CHIP Alumni Maintenance Program. So for people who need to be on a yearly kind of, and probably people do, if you have significant health problems, it probably is a good idea to go on some kind of maintenance program. What about our principles? The principle of our new company is we will only advocate interventions that are affordable and accessible to nearly everyone. I'm not going to be teaching people about expensive things they have to go out and buy. They don't have to buy $100 worth of supplements every month. I know some people do that. Vitamins and all that stuff. You don't need that. You only need 1 or 2 vitamins. Vitamins B12 and maybe vitamin D if you live in Rochester because you can't get that aside. And we're only going to sell educational services. We're going to sell the CHIP program, cooking instruction, exercise, stress reduction, yoga, meditation. And we've already started with we have our first cooking instruction next week at the Rochester Academy of Medicine. It's already sold out. So, and we will not sell products such as supplements, vitamins, equipment, etc. The only thing we're going to be making any money on or losing money on will be education. So I don't know if you know about this, but Michelangelo was on loan to the United States for a while. Did you know that? Yeah. And when he went, oh darn! I had this great video of Stephen Colbert. There's no way I can show this, right, guys? All right. I'll send you all a link. Anyway, he's talking about the new dietary recommendations, and we're just gonna have to skip it. But that was him. Anyway, let's talk about the history of dietary guidelines. So most people know the 4 basic food groups. You probably didn't know that there were originally 12 in 1930, and that butter had its own group. And then there were other fats, right? So 12 was too complicated, and so they reduced it to 7 in 1940. That first one was 1930. Butter lost its group, but they're still like. And you'll notice what happens as we go forward in time. Eventually, when we get to the 4 basic food groups, then 50% are animal products. So what's happening is the meat and dairy industry have basically lobbied to get their food front and center. Now, when I ask my brother-in-law what the 4 basic food groups are, he always says burger, fries, ketchup, shake. Which is good for business, right? Now, in 1991, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, have people heard of them? Neil Barnett, and wonderful organization. They came out with the new 4 food groups: whole grains, vegetables, legumes, and fruit. Then we remember the food guide pyramid. That was actually pretty decent. It first came out in 1991. Then it got withdrawn because the meat industry didn't like the fact that there was this little corner over here. But it came back out pretty much unchanged anyway. The meat industry lost on that one. But it still didn't like it. And you could actually cut it off right there. You just flip away the top of the pyramid, and you'd have a pretty good guideline. Then in 2005, the USDA came out with this, which nobody knew what that was. That's called my pyramid. It's a little guy running up some steps, and there's no food on it. And you had to use a computer to find out what you're supposed to eat. If you went online, interestingly enough, and you typed in all your numbers, your weight, activity level, all that, it would give you a different amount of food that you were supposed to eat meat or beans, legumes, starchy food, vegetables. Those would go up and down, but dairy was always 3 cups. Didn't matter. You could say you were 1,000 pounds or you were 50 pounds. Right? It always came out 3 cups. And actually, in 2000, that's interesting because that was the year that the recommendation went up to 3 cups. Before that, it was only 2 cups. Which, if I had more time, and I might at the end, I'll explain how that happened. That was very successful lobbying by the dairy. Then PCRM came out with, let me go back to that. This is the Power Plate, 2010. We love this. This is beautiful. This is all you need to eat, right? Fruits, grains, vegetables, and legumes. You don't need dairy. You don't need any meat or fish. You can survive on this and thrive on this. Then PCRM lobbied the USDA to come out with a better graphic, and look what they came up with. So they came up with My Plate, which is almost the same, except that's dairy over here, right? So instead of putting on legumes, they have protein. What is protein anyway? Protein is, it's like, there's no protein in grains or fruits or vegetables. There is. You don't actually need to worry about protein, which we're going to talk about later, but your body needs about, I'll talk about it now, since I don't have my videos. You need about 7% of your calories to come from protein. How much protein is in a potato? Anybody know? The percent calories from protein in a potato. 10%. Good for you. Thank you. 10% is exactly right. Maybe 11. I don't know. It's something like that. But you only need 7%, so you could live on potatoes, right? Did you take my course? No. Okay. And I just want you to know how similar the two graphics are. I just remember that PCRM's graphic came out first. So was this progress? No, that wasn't progress. But actually, the latest one, this is the current graphic over here, that actually is progress. For one thing, it doesn't say meat on it anymore, right? You got rid of that. If you just get rid of the dairy, it's pretty perfect. But this is even more progress. The Power Plate from the Physicians Committee. Actually, one of the handouts here, the Vegetarian Starter Kit that you all got, the blue one, that's from the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. Excellent. And basically, everything you need to know is in there. So, the thousands of hours that I spent learning about this stuff, you can get it all from that. But the reason you need to understand this stuff is so you can argue with people, right? Because people are going to challenge you as soon as you walk out of here. I'm going to have you completely convinced before you leave the room. And then you're going to walk out and you're going to go, and someone's going to challenge you. You're going to go, what? What did you just say? So anybody heard of Caldwell-Esselstyn? The Esselstyn program? Okay. Okay. So he's a plant-based hero. He was a surgeon at the Cleveland Clinic. I shouldn't say was. He's still alive. He's about 81 now. He was a member of the Board of Governors, president of the medical staff. He also has an Olympic gold medal. And he was on the Yale rowing team in 1956. And they won the gold medal in Sydney, Australia, which was pretty exciting. He also was in Vietnam. So not necessarily your typical warm, fuzzy guy. But he did get a Compassion Award from the Benjamin Spock Foundation. So that's pretty cool. And everyone knows Benjamin Spock is a baby doctor who became vegan, actually, toward the end of his life. And this is the book that Esselstyn wrote based on his research with prevent and reverse heart disease. So this is a friend of Esselstyn's, who actually also works at the Cleveland Clinic. And he was 44 at the time this picture was taken. He actually succeeded Esselstyn as chairman of the Breast Cancer Task Force. Now, this was after Esselstyn had become well known for a program that he had developed where people could avoid getting surgical coronary bypass or stents just by changing their diet. Really? You could do that just by changing your diet? Well, let me tell you a story. So it was Friday in November 1996. I had operated all day. I finished, said goodbye to my last patient, and got a very bad headache. It hit me in a flash. I had to sit down. A minute or two after that, the chest pain started. It radiated up my arm and shoulder and into my jaw. So what was happening? I was having a heart attack, right? 44 years old, no risk factors. That happens. A coronary arteriogram. Oh, so he's in the Cleveland Clinic, right? That's the place to have your heart attack, right? I guess it was a little confusing to them because he wasn't coming out of the ED. So they will have bring a gurney over to wherever he was and take him over to cardiology and do an angiogram on him. But the bad news was this problem was inoperable, and where the blockage was located, they couldn't put in a stent. Is that good news or bad news? In his case, it's good news. Why? Because 2 weeks later, he and his wife went to the Esselstyn's house for dinner, and they immediately embarked on the Esselstyn plan. And his total cholesterol, which wasn't bad to begin with, went from 156 down to 89. Did you know that 89 is actually a normal cholesterol? If you're a Chinese peasant, a total cholesterol could be like between 80 and 120. And my cholesterol range is between 90 and 130. So I'm like a Chinese peasant. And his LDL, which is probably the most important number, dropped down to 38. You know, if you get your cholesterol or LDL under 70, you're in really good shape. You probably it's almost impossible to have a heart attack at that point. But you're thinking, well, how do they know that this really helped them? Well, remember I told you he had an angiogram? So anybody here? Do we have any kids from the cath lab here? Probably not. You guys are all busy. Anyway, this is the left anterior descending artery, the main artery to the front of your heart. And this is his irregular narrowing in the artery. Pretty nasty looking lesion. Out too far for them to reach down with stent. That was in 1996. What do you think he looked like 3 years later when they repeated his angiogram? Whoops. Looked like that. So from that to that. Pretty amazing, right? It actually opened up. Who would have thought that plaques could get better? Now, you're not going to get results like that every time, and you don't need to, because truthfully, you just need to stabilize your plaques and make them regress a little bit. Because someone who has angina, the first day they have angina, what was it like yesterday? Well, they didn't have angina. They were able to go up the stairs without a problem. All you have to do is get back to yesterday. And it doesn't require much of a change in diameter of your vessel, because resistance to flow varies by the fourth power. So there's a huge change in resistance to blood flow when there's a tiny change in the diameter of the vessel. So when you stop eating a diet that basically turns these plaques are like pustules. Really, they're just like under the surface of the artery, they're just like boils, and they're inflamed. And there's white blood cells pouring in them to go after this oxidized cholesterol. And if you can just eat a lot of veggies, eat tons of greens, lots of kale, and stop eating the stuff that's making it, that's causing those plaques to develop, the plaques can stabilize. The top can get a thick cap over the top, usually scar tissue. The pus inside dries up. It's never going to go away completely, but it doesn't matter. It just has to shrink a little bit and stabilize. These are the endothelial cells. Esselstyn's really big on endothelial cells. And I actually had a video on endothelial cells. Believe it or not, it's called Save Your Endothelial Cells. So we'll have to show that at another time. These little guys form this lining on the inside of your body. It's huge. It's like several tennis courts. And there's about 60,000 miles of blood vessels in your body. And every single one of those blood vessels is lined with this thin membrane of endothelial cells. And they're the ones that are encountering all the food that you're eating and the smoke you're inhaling. Right? And they are the ones basically deciding what gets through into your tissues. So you injure those by eating a lousy diet and smoking, and then that's when your arteries get into trouble. So here's a normal lumen. And here's a lumen is the hole inside the artery, right? There's a little tiny lumen in someone whose artery is like almost completely black. Now, is this person going to have a heart attack? Maybe, probably not, actually. You know why? Because this person is going to form collaterals around this blockage. Because this didn't happen overnight. This has been going on for years. And so the heart tissue downstream from that artery is saying, I need more blood. I need more nutrients. And so the heart, the tiny little vessels that already exist, they get bigger. And they're called collateral vessels that bypass it. It's like a detour around that narrowing. So when this finally closes over, probably nothing's going to happen. Because the other arteries just take over. This is the kind of one that kills you. This is a plaque that's not big enough to cause angina, because whenever this guy goes up the stairs, he goes jogging, he's getting enough blood. So he could be like Jim Fix, like the runner who killed everyone when he was 50 when he was out running. So what happens, one of these plaques, this is an active pus locale. This is a boil, a pimple, under the endothelial cells. And it's just waiting, it's just expanding. And one day, it cracks. And once it cracks like that, it forms a little blood clot on it. And also you have this blood rushing past it like wind on a sail, and it rips it open. And then you get this. You get a big clot, complete blockage, and no collaterals, right? Because the heart downstream hasn't been asking for blood supply. So no collateral, this person keels over. This person has a heart attack. This is an aorta, obviously from autopsy. And you can see how nice and smooth it is, and pink. This is a normal aorta. These are the little arteries that come out that feed the spine, the spinal arteries. This is an aorta in someone who has really bad atherosclerosis. It looks like cheese pizza, right? It kind of is. That didn't happen overnight. That's years and years and years on the standard American diet. So let me ask you something. What if this stuff were growing on your face? Would you let it happen for years and years and years and years? No, you'd be the dermatologist tomorrow. Maybe tonight. You'd get it right. You'd call him, say, what's happening to me? But it's on the inside. You don't know about it. It's insidious. And this is growing in everybody who's on the standard American diet. When we do autopsies on soldiers who died in Vietnam or Korea and compare them to the autopsies of the soldiers from Korea or Vietnam who grew up there, our soldiers already had this stuff going on. Not to that degree, but because they were only 18 to 20, right? But they had it started, whereas the soldiers from the other countries didn't. So what is the Esselstyn plan for eliminating heart disease? Foods to include, lots of vegetables, lots of greens. It's going to be basically the whole food plant-based diet. Lots of greens, legumes, whole grains, fruit, no nuts or oil. What? No nuts or oil? Okay, I know that's what you're thinking. When he has someone who's that sick, no nuts, no avocado, no coconut. The only nut that's allowed is a chestnut because it's really like a little potato. It's not really a nut. I mean, botanically it's a nut, but it's not, nutritionally a nut. It's got very little oil. So basically, he doesn't want any fat going to this person from their diet other than what's naturally occurring in the other foods. And there is actually fat in carrots and kale. There's fat. There's fat in all food. And enough that you're going to be fine. You're not going to get deficient in any of the essential fatty acids. And we don't advocate using oils in our program either. We don't shy away from using nuts or nut butters, which contain oil, but we don't recommend actually squeezing something and using oil from what you squeeze out, because that's a fractionated food. When you start getting into fractionated foods, that's when you get into trouble. And if you keep the principles really simple, which is what we're advocating here, it's easy. That's obviously a fractionated food, just like white sugar is a fractionated food. So here are the foods to avoid. Anything with a face or a mother, meat, poultry, fish, and eggs, dairy products, oils, including olive oil, canola oil, all the so-called healthy oils. Refined grains, white flour, white rice, etc. He wants you to avoid nuts. So this is the only line that we tell when someone says they have active heart disease and they're about to go into the knife, I tell them follow the Esselstyn rules because it works. When someone else is coming to our course and they just want to learn how to eat healthy, we tell them some nuts are okay, about a handful or an ounce, 30 grams. And avoid all processed foods and foods with added sugars, which basically includes almost everything in a package from the center of the supermarket. So how fast does this diet work? Remember I showed you how quickly that angiogram cleared up in 3 years? So 3 years is a pretty long time, right? But that's because we didn't have an angiogram on him like 6 weeks later. And it probably wouldn't have looked that good 6 weeks later. But here's a SPECT stress nuclear cardiac test. I don't know if you're familiar with looking at these. But this is what the heart is supposed to look like. This is after 3 weeks. And this is what it looked like right after he had his episode, right when he started the program. You can see the apex of the heart, which is this part down here, is not getting any blood flow. So that's ischemic. It's actually not getting, it's obviously getting some blood flow because later on it filled in. But this person was exercising on a treadmill, and very little blood was getting there, enough to keep it alive. But later on, when you go on this diet, and in 3 weeks, it opens up. And this is what we really care about. We don't actually care about what the arteries look like. We just care if you're perfusing your myocardium. However the blood gets there is fine. It can go into the little collaterals. It can go into the big vessel after it opens up, as long as it gets there. Here's another example. This is 12 weeks. This is normal after therapy. This is what it looked like right after the initiation of the program. And you can see the lateral wall is ischemic. This is 6 weeks, almost normal here. There's a little completed infarct at the inferior wall of the heart. But you can see this whole medial wall, the septal wall, and the inferior wall, really, really ischemic, not getting enough blood during stress. And look at the cholesterol. The cholesterol drops down 290. From started 290 down to 130. There's another example. 3 weeks have gone by, practically normal. Looked pretty sick at the beginning. Cholesterol, significant improvement. Could you get a result like that with Lipitor? Maybe if you took a lot, but you'd have all kinds of muscle aches, you'd be damaging your liver. You can do it with diet, and the side effect of that is, you lose weight and your mood improves. Okay, this is the video I want to show you about saving your endothelial cells. It's a really cute cartoon, which is actually dedicated to Dr. Esselstyn. And let's see if I can do the narration. I can't. Okay. So we're going to actually have time for questions, it looks like. That's good. So should physicians lead by example? Like, here's an example. More doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. So, really. And, you know, this is happening right now. This kind of, it's the same people who were selling cigarettes then, in the 50s and 60s, about 1946, who are basically pushing junk food on you now. Same people. And basically denying that there's any problem with it, making it sound like, well, nobody really knows, it's controversial. So the average American just says, well, nobody knows. You know, I like my Big Mac and fries, I'll have that. I mean, they even came up with this thing called the T-zone, right? What is that? It looks scientific, right? T is for taste, T is for throat. Come on. So here's me leading by example. Every 5 years or so, I run a 5K just for the cause. And I wait till I turn into a new age group. So this is when I turned 60. And I came in first. And people have pointed out that it probably wasn't great that I was advertising a bagel. I didn't think of that, but you know, I don't eat a bagel, so it's whole grain. It was whole grain, exactly. Yeah. So you know, you can't win with this crowd, right? What about the bagels? Anyway, so I beat the other guys in my age group. Well, they were all in wheelchairs, so it didn't really matter, right? But I beat them by, I don't know, over a minute and a half. And then, but what I was really proud of, there were 125 runners, and I came in 28. So I thought that was pretty good. I like 5Ks because they're short. Right? You know, it's over in 20 minutes. No matter how bad you feel better in 5 minutes. It's great. So here's a quiz. And this quiz is I give during my course, and you would have gotten some more of the teaching that would allow you to maybe get these questions right or have a higher chance of getting it right. So I'm going to ask you, which of the following contains the most potassium? Skim milk, a cup of skim milk, a medium banana, a medium potato, 2 ounces of cheddar cheese, or a cup of black beans. Raise your hand if you vote for the skim milk. Good on you. Okay, how about the banana? Excellent. How about the potato? Okay. The cheddar cheese? The black beans? Okay, you guys are all great. But you probably thought it was the banana. That was the first thing you thought, right? The banana? Because that's what everyone says. The actual answer is the potato. Has almost twice as much as the banana. You know why? Because all fruits and vegetables are loaded with potassium. Why do we even care about potassium? We only care about potassium in our diet because people are on diuretics, right? Because they have heart disease, because they're eating lousy food. So they're on diuretics, which makes you pee out your potassium, so you have to make sure you get enough potassium. So your doctor says, oh, put a banana on your cereal in the morning, and that'll take care of it. Truthfully, you could put a tomato on your cereal. You could eat potatoes all day. You could just eat lots of fruits and vegetables, and you'd be fine. It's not really, it's just something about, I don't know, was it the banana lobby maybe? I'm not sure. But the point is we get these things in our head about food and nutrition that are stuck there that maybe aren't true. Okay, here's a question. Which contains the most calcium? Not that it really matters. And I throw that in there because we tell people they get about 1,200 milligrams of calcium a day in this country. You know how much you really need? You maybe need 500 or 600 milligrams of calcium a day. That's it. The real reason we have osteoporosis in this country is because A, we eat too much meat and protein, animal products. B, we don't get enough exercise. And C, we don't have the sun, right? And D, actually, I left out something. D is that we don't eat a lot of green leafies. And green leafies are full of magnesium and vitamin K, which are really great for your bones. So you can forget about the calcium, even though that's what everybody's worried about. In fact, there's evidence that getting too much calcium is bad for you. It increases your risk of heart disease and prostate cancer. Why would you want that? So which has the most calcium? A cup of milk, 2 cups of broccoli, 10 medium figs, or a cup of calcium-fortified orange juice? Who votes for the milk? How about the broccoli?
Orange juice.
Okay, what about the fig? They're close, I think. The orange juice? And the answer is
Broccoli.
Yeah. I hear them in the other room. Broccoli, she said. 2 cups of broccoli is 360 milligrams. If you ate 4 cups of broccoli, which you wouldn't have to do, you would get all the calcium you need for a day, right? So just eat 2 cups of broccoli and throw in some figs or anything else, right? And that's not all you're going to eat during the day, right? And you're going to have enough calcium. So the way the dairy industry got the recommendation raised from 2 cups to 3 cups was trying to get the USDA to be convinced that there was a calcium crisis in this country. Even the USDA didn't fall for that. The USDA said, no, the people are getting enough calcium. So what they did was they convinced people we're not getting enough potassium. I'm not making this up. This is in the Wall Street Journal, an article in 2004. The article was about how to successfully lobby the government. It wasn't really about, healthy nutrition. All right, what about protein? As a percentage of calories, which of the following is highest in protein? Not that it really matters, right? You just don't have to worry about protein. And when you walk out of here, you're not going to believe me, because the first thing you're going to pick up is a package of food, and that front is going to say 10 grams of protein, right? Or 6 grams of soy protein, or 10 grams of whey, whatever. And you go to the gym, and people are taking protein shakes. But you need about 7% of your calories during the course of the day to come from protein, and you will not be protein deficient. Does anybody know anyone who's protein deficient? Have you met anybody? Do you know anybody who's overweight, or has high blood pressure, or diabetes, or cancer, or heart disease? Yeah, you do. But you don't know anybody who's protein deficient. So why is that always the first question?
Did you worry about the protein for your children when they were little?
No. And I'll answer that question later again. But what do you think has more protein as a percentage of calories? Whole milk? I'm assuming you want me to be done by 1, right? Yeah. Okay. I can do that. 2% milk, broccoli, cheddar cheese, navy beans, kale, McDonald's hamburger. As a percentage of calories from protein, which wins? Beans, kale, broccoli. The answer is broccoli. It's 44% calories from protein. Does that mean you should live on broccoli? You could. You'd probably get protein toxic, actually. The problem is broccoli is not very calorically dense, right? You have to eat a lot of broccoli to get your 2,500 calories a day. But that isn't the point. And that's why beans are a great source of protein, because they're calorically dense, right? You can eat a lot, get a lot of calories from your beans, and those calories are going to have way more protein than you need. You need 7%. You're going to get 23% as a percentage of calories from protein in navy beans. McDonald's hamburger comes in last. And the guy there with his burger is saying, when he finds out I'm vegan, he says, where do you get your protein? Right? And he's getting the worst. He's got the worst one, right? So kale is amazing. These green leafy vegetables are amazing. They're made out of cells, right? All cells contain all the 3 macronutrients: protein, carbohydrate, and fat. They even have fat, believe it or not. And they have the essential fatty acids, the omega-3 fatty acids that everybody worries about. Where do fish get those? They get them from algae. They don't make them themselves. They get them from algae. It's a plant product. So if they can get you asking the wrong questions, they don't have to worry about the answers. So that's the protein question. It's the wrong question. You know who said this? You'd have to get kind of literate to know that. I didn't know that. This is from Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon. And I've known about this quote for probably 30 years. It's an amazing quote when you think about it, because we're constantly focusing on the wrong thing. Like the big argument about who's going to pay for healthcare, right? Nobody's going to win that argument, right? Why aren't we arguing about why does it cost so much? Why don't we just focus on why does it cost so much and forget about, I'm not spending my energy on figuring out who's going to pay for it. I know it's important, but what's really important is how can we get the cost down? So here's an example of the wrong question. Where do I get my protein? What's this guy? He's an elephant, right? He's a vegan. He doesn't eat any animal products. He's not protein deficient. What about this lady? She's a cow. She's a vegan. She gets all of her calcium from grass and other green leafies. She gets it from vegetables. And she has so much that she's able to put it in her milk. This is a gorilla. He's a vegan. He gets his iron from green leafy vegetables. So those are the wrong questions. Oh, here's another wrong question. Where do we get our vitamin B12? It is true that if you only live on animal products, you will become vitamin B12 deficient after about 3 years. Your body stores a lot of vitamin B12, and because B12 is not an animal product, it's a bacterial product, and it's in dirt. If we didn't scrub our vegetables so much, we'd probably get enough B12 that way. Right? It's possible that some people actually make B12 in their own gut because there's bacteria in your gut. Some of them may make vitamin B12, but we just say for the cause, don't do it. Don't mess with it. You need to take vitamin B12 a couple of times a week. If you forget, you can go for months and forget because you store 3 years worth, right? But most adult Americans, even if they're not vegans, are B12, have low B12. And pretty much everybody should be supplementing with B12. It's the only vitamin we recommend. We don't recommend a multivitamin. A lot of vegans have much better B12 status than the rest of the population because we're so worried about becoming deficient that, I keep it in the bathroom. I pop them every day, basically. And B12 deficiency is nasty. And the thing what will happen is if somebody dies from a B12 deficiency, the newspaper headline will be what? vegan dies from B12 deficiency, right? There, you should never do this. How many thousands of times a day do people die from heart disease? Does that ever make the headlines? No, because it happens all the time. I'm starting to rant, aren't I? Sorry. So B12 is not an animal planet. It comes from bacteria. Here's some examples of the right questions. So when someone says to me, where do I get my protein? I say, where do you get your Lipitor? And they say, where do you get your iron? I say, where do you get your antihypertensive? And then they say, where do you get your B12? And I say, where do you get your insulin? And where do you get your calcium? And I say, where do you get your chemotherapy? I know it's kind of nasty. I don't really do that, but. So how did that experiment on our kids turn out? So here they are in 2003. This is the Galapagos Islands. Everybody here is a vegan, including the tortoise. Here we are crossing through the Panama Canal in 2004. We like to travel. My wife doesn't like to travel. You get to see her in a minute, but because she stays home. But anyway, there she is. There's my wife. And everybody was worried about Nathaniel because he's so short, right? And he's a vegan. He's never going to grow. So then he popped up. And this is May 2009. Obviously, weak bone and brain damaged. She graduated from Oberlin. She's just got her master's degree in teaching and is teaching in a school in Brooklyn now. She graduated from NYU after Colgate, and she has her master's in musical theater composition. And Nathaniel is a Yale Whiffenpoon from recent Yale graduate. He's they call him the Evangelist. Actually, I have a confession. We're not that great as parents because all three of our kids are making their living in music. So I don't know how that's going to work out. But actually, those two guys, they're roommates in New York City, and they're both teaching music. So that's good. There's a job there, right? Here they are in December of that year. And you can see brain damaged. There's my lovely wife. Rebecca enters school. Anybody know what a 46er is?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the day I became a 46er. If you climb all 46 high peaks in the Adirondacks, you become a 46er. And it was kind of a nasty day. You can see it was raining and foggy, but it was really a great day. The thing had champagne right there. Rebecca has a patch that says Great Peak, which is the 6th peak that I finished on. And it was really, really a lot of fun. And the thing already had his 46er. Rebecca's working on it. She's up to 40. Elizabeth is our indoor girl, so we had to paste her in there. Here, this is this spring, actually, March 2015. Rebecca and Nathaniel and I went hiking in Zion National Park. We climbed up from that valley. And then, amazingly enough, it turns out Elizabeth can hike. Because we went to visit Nathaniel in Alaska. So we climbed up this really cool mountain, had great views. So, remember, do not share this with anyone. It'll put me out of business. So, let's put the lights on, please. Thank you. Yes.
Did your children sorry for the audio, guys. This was the first time.
But my wife wouldn't want me to admit this?
I just wonder because
Yeah.
And I just
Oh, well, no. They never really did. What I'm about to admit is that for 2 weeks right after high school, or maybe it was a freshman in college, my son and his buddies took a road trip. They said, we want you to eat meat and dairy. So they went and they drove, I think it was almost 2 weeks, maybe 10 days or something. And they said, you don't know you don't like it because you've never had it. So for about 10 days, they went on this wild road trip. They went to New Orleans and all these other places. And then he came back and that wasn't that great. So, yeah, but when they were small and living in our home and completely under our control, never really. And even when they would go out to parties and stuff, call ahead and our friends would make them, or they would bring special cakes. Cocoa ice cream type thing. Yeah. You're pregnant? We should talk afterwards. Yeah. There's actually a section of pregnancy in that handout there. Yeah. Anybody else?
What about this whole probiotic?
Which news article are you talking about? Because there's so many things rolling around.
Well, no, there's just such a push that everything, either take a probiotic or get this yogurt because it has probiotics in it or whatever, blah, blah, blah.
So forget it. What you basically know, are you a gardener by any chance?
Yes, I am.
All right. Do you know the difference between like typical gardening and organic gardening?
Yes.
All right. So typical gardening is you feed the plant, right? You plant, you dribble fertilizer on it, you help, give the plant all this nutrients, right? Organic gardening, you feed the soil. So, and you make the soil healthy, and then the plants will do well. And basically, that's how I think of my gut There's a whole bunch, it's an organic garden in there. Okay, and those little guys, they want a lot of places to hide and hang out and do all kinds of fun things. So lots and lots of fiber. I mean, I'm probably taking in close to 100 grams of fiber a day. And, you know, the average American takes in maybe 12 or 15 grams of fiber. And so think of it, yes, you do want all those great organisms living in there, but taking healthy organisms and putting them into your gut, if your gut doesn't have any healthy place for them to live, it's like basically, you know, your soil is like rock hard and you dump earthworms on it, thinking that's going to make your soil better. The earthworms are all going to die, right? They need a place to live. So you got to make the soil healthy, and then you don't have to put the earthworms in. They're going to show up on their own, right? So yeah. Anybody else? Yes.
As another example of the wrong question, so I'm a vegetarian right now, and people will ask, well, why do you have canine teeth? You know, you have canine teeth because you're supposed to eat meat.
Right. So her question is, right. So she says another example of the wrong question is people argue whether she's vegetarian. They say to her, well, you have canine teeth. Aren't you supposed to, it means you're supposed to eat meat. Well, yeah, we do have canine, which in case, I know our cats, we have cats. Their canines, first of all, they stick out over their lower lips, right? They're canines, okay? That argument doesn't usually work very well with people like that. The argument I say, okay, if you think you're a natural meat eater, I want you to run down that deer, okay? And with your bare hands, no tools, I want you to kill it and then eat it. You can't do it because we don't really have the dentition for that, right? We just don't. They probably won't go for that argument either. They're just trying to make you feel bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, it's people. There's all kinds of arguments about whether we're naturally vegetarian or not, whether we're natural meat eaters. And yeah, there's no question that humans didn't populate the entire globe. They couldn't have if they were just, you know, living as vegans. It wouldn't be possible because, you know, they couldn't have gotten across the, you know, Bering Land Straits without chasing the herds because that's, you know, calories on you know, on the hook that's accessible. There's nothing to eat up there otherwise. But it's, if you look at the healthiest populations, they're the populations that eat a whole food plant-based diet or as close as you can get to that. Yeah. Yes.
No, I had a heart attack and we switched to a plant-based diet based on assistance.
Right.
But I'm also a heart patient that takes drugs.
Okay.
You wouldn't suggest not doing the drugs.
So he's asking. He says he's a heart patient who follows us with because you had a heart attack.
Yes.
Yeah. And he's asking me if he should stop taking the drugs. I am not your doctor.
Yeah.
I would never. No. And I.
Both, right? Let them treat me medically as well as.
You can. We should have this conversation offline. I mean, basically, I'm not in a position to give people medical advice. It is true that most of the time you don't need to take medication. And if people go on this program, the CHIP program, we send a letter to their doctor warning them that they may have to reduce or eliminate their medication. Most diabetics will come off their metformin if they're on metformin. They often will reduce their insulin needs by a lot. You may not need to be under statin anymore. A lot of hypertensives will have one of the problems. They get dizzy because now their blood pressure is trying to be normal, but they're taking medication that makes it low. So we have to work it out with their doctor before they start the program that, you know, what if they feel pain? Well, they should stop taking the medication. But they have to get those instructions from their doctor. I'm not going to become their physician. It's just not safe. But yeah, but it's a great question, and it does come up for sure. So yeah, you're next.
Question about the high cholesterol and the lowering after 3 or 6 weeks on the program.
Yeah.
2 questions.
Sure.
So if we have a cholesterol that high, up to like 250,
Right.
is there like low blood perfusion to the heart with the cholesterol that high?
So the cholesterol itself is not causing that directly. I mean, it is actually ultimately, but it's not going to happen right away, right? Those plaques take a while to build up. So just because you have a high cholesterol like that doesn't mean automatically. Now, if you're 60 years old and your cholesterol's been that level for your entire life, you probably do have significant narrowings throughout your body.
So would any of us that had a high cholesterol went on this program, after 3 or 6 weeks, you can see a decrease?
So your cholesterol will come down, and your arteries will start to get better. I mean, unless you already have diagnosable ischemia, like, you know, the picture on the left-hand side, that shows the ischemia. If you're not having symptoms, you probably don't have ischemia now. Even though your arteries are narrow, they're probably enough to at least get you through a treadmill test. I don't know that for sure. But yeah, I mean, when you stop assaulting your vessels with all this really nasty stuff, they heal really quickly, especially if you bathe your vessels with all these antioxidants that are in the greens. Like, one of the things Esselstyn does is he tells people just eat lots of kale, tons of it. I mean, he has people eating greens 6 times a day. Like breakfast, snack, lunch. I mean, 6 times a day before you go to bed, because you want to be constantly bathing those endothelial cells with something that's going to help them heal. So, yeah. Yes?
What is the take on raw veganism, vegetarianism, and fake meat?
I love this question. Her question is, what is my take on raw veganism, fruitarianism, and fake meats? So I don't think anybody can do a 100% raw diet. Some people do. I don't think it's practical for most. Well, I shouldn't say anybody. Most people can't do that. And I don't think it's necessary. There's actually some nutrients which are more accessible after you cook the food. There's some nutrients which are more accessible if you don't cook it. Most Americans probably need to eat more raw food, right? But I don't think getting all raw is either advisable or practical. As far as fruitarian goes, remember I said it's almost impossible to design it. Actually, I didn't say this, but it's almost impossible to design a diet that's deficient in protein if you're living on whole food plant-based diet. The only one way you could do it is with fruit, because some fruit is below that magic 7%. Like an apple is about 2% calories from protein. So if all you lived on were apples, yeah, you would be protein deficient. So if you were on a fruitarian diet, you'd have to be careful. Now, I do know some people who would say they want to live on fruit, and they seem pretty healthy to me, but I don't know how that works. Then the other question about fake meats. So we call those transitional foods. If you were to take someone who's like on a standard American diet and invite them over to our house, and we feed you the healthiest meal that we have at our house, they would not like it because it doesn't have enough salt, doesn't have enough fat, doesn't have enough sugar. They just would think it just wouldn't taste right. And they would say that's because it's vegan, and I would say no, it's because it's healthy. So what we'll do is we'll give them veggie burgers and other kind of stuff, you know, so veggie sausage, veggie bacon, all that kind of stuff. And then they can eat it and say, oh, I like this. It doesn't exactly taste like meat, but it tastes pretty good. And then we say, well, that's the first step. The next step is now we got to wean you off of that, because that stuff is very, very processed. It's very high in salt. I mean, well, you know that you're shaking your head. I know that's why you asked the question. You were trying to trick me, weren't you? I was going to say, no, that's great stuff. No,
I needed to think on it.
yeah. So we eat it once in a while, especially when our kids are around. Like on the 4th of July, we throw burgers on the grill, veggie burgers and hot dogs and stuff. So yeah, once in a while. But we don't really have much health. You know, none of us are overweight in my family and don't have significant health issues. But if you have significant health issues that are caused by the standard American diet, the last thing you want to do is throw gasoline on this fire, right? In your body, your body's on fire. You know, if you've been on the standard American diet, your body is on fire and it's, you know, full of stuff you don't want anymore. So I think it's 1 o'clock. Oh, it's actually after 1. Thank you very much. I apologize for